Every tool in a hardware store has a price tag. What the tag never mentions is the cost of deciding you are smarter than the engineers who made it. 12 true stories of people who looked at a finished, tested, affordable product and said the 5 most expensive words in the language. I can make that myself. Stay for number 8. He named his machine after exactly what it ended up doing. We begin underwater, where overconfidence goes to get pressure tested. A man wanted to explore the bottom of a lake. Scuba lessons cost money. Certified gear costs money. But a garden hose was right there in the yard, and in his head, breathing through 15 feet of it was just snorkeling with extra steps. So one end went in his teeth, the other end stayed floating at the surface, and down he walked into the deep, feeling like Jacques Cousteau on a budget. Here is the physics nobody sold him. A snorkel works because your lungs sit a few inches under the surface. Go down even 3 feet, and the water squeezes your chest harder than your breathing muscles can pull back. At 10 feet, the pressure on your rib cage is measured in hundreds of pounds. The air at the top of the hose stays at surface pressure while your chest sits in a hydraulic press, so you inhale and nothing arrives. It is like trying to drink a milkshake through a straw while an offensive lineman sits on the cup. And a long hose adds a bonus round. All that tubing stores your own exhaled breath, so every new inhale serves you a warm helping of recycled carbon dioxide. He was not breathing air through a straw. He was rebreathing yesterday's air while a lake stood on his chest. He drowned within easy reach of the surface, holding a tool that waters tomatoes flawlessly. The distance between him and all the air on planet Earth was shorter than the hose he brought to reach it. His spiritual cousins, meanwhile, hook garage air compressors to hoses and go diving on machine air, which arrives seasoned with oil mist and carbon monoxide, and slowly turns lung tissue into the filter of a deep fryer. Doctors call the result lipoid pneumonia. The compressor manual calls it not FOR breathing AIR in capital letters on the first page, because the lawyers have met people like this before. A real snorkel costs $10. A certified tank fill costs about as much as lunch. The lake charged nothing and collected everything. In 2012, the internet fell in love with a video called the world's largest rope swing. Riders on ropes rigged through Corona Arch near Moab, Utah, a sandstone loop tall enough to swallow an 11-story building, swinging through it like human pendulums. 17 million views. And because this is America, commercial guides immediately started selling that exact ride. Measured ropes, tested anchors, professionals with clipboards who did the math for you for about the price of a concert ticket. Kyle Stocking, 22, watched the video and decided the math was a paywall he could jump over. In March 2013, he and his friends drove out and rigged their own ropes through the arch. Now, a pendulum is one of the most honest machines in the universe. It has one moving part and one rule. The length of the rope decides the lowest point of your swing. Not courage, not vibes, not how sincerely you believe in yourself. Length. It is the same equation that runs every grandfather clock on Earth, and no grandfather clock has ever been talked out of it. Kyle left too much slack in the system. On a pendulum, extra slack is not a margin of comfort. It IS the error, in feet, payable on the first swing. It lowers the bottom of your arc, and everything already living at that altitude becomes part of the experience. His arc ended at the base of the arch. And understand, nothing failed. The rope held. The anchors held. The knots held. Every component he rigged performed perfectly, which is the most brutal review a plan can receive. The sandstone did what sandstone has done for 100 million years. It held its position. That is its entire job description. What stings is that the correct rope length was not a secret guarded by monks. It was a number. A guy with a laminated checklist was selling that number every weekend, bundled with a harness and a waiver. Geometry is the cheapest teacher in the world, right up until you skip the class. Then it bills you for the whole semester at once. To Kentucky, where the Silver Trail Distillery was doing everything the romantic way. Small batch, copper, heritage recipes, moonshine made legal. Which makes this one hurt more, because the fatal shortcut was not in the whiskey. It was in the welding. A still is, functionally, a giant kettle of boiling alcohol vapor. Vapor means pressure, and pressure has exactly 2 exit strategies. A relief valve you installed on purpose, or a hole it makes for itself. That is why real distillery vessels are welded continuously, all the way around every seam, and fitted with a safety valve. The boring details that separate distillery equipment from a bomb with a ladle attached. The still at Silver Trail had neither. An internal plate had been tack welded, little spot welds instead of a full seam, which is the welding equivalent of holding a submarine hatch shut with a post-it note. The Kentucky Fire Marshal's report later spelled it out in the driest bureaucratic prose ever written about an explosion. Not designed to hold pressure, no proper relief valve, tack welded as opposed to welded fully around. And the terrible thing about pressure is that it conducts a full engineering audit of your vessel every single second it exists, for free, without being asked. On an April day in 2015, the audit found the post-it. The bottom of the still blew out and traveled through the door like the building owed it money. Head distiller Jay Rogers was burned over most of his body and survived. His assistant, Kyle Rogers, 27 years old, fought his injuries for weeks and did not. Here is the part that refuses to be funny. A pressure-rated vessel, or even just the valve, was a catalog order and a modest check. And the larger irony stands one aisle over in every liquor store on the planet, where thousands of bottles sit at rest. Every single one of them produced in equipment that was welded all the way around. Any bottle on that shelf costs less than the difference between a full weld and a tack. Moscow, February 2020. Yekaterina Didenko was an Instagram influencer with more than 1 million followers, and her niche, I need you to hold this detail in both hands, was pharmaceuticals, medication reviews, chemistry-adjacent content, professionally, every day. For her 29th birthday, the party moved to a rented pool complex, and someone had an idea for a showstopper. Pour dry ice into the pool and make a rolling wall of fog, not a scoop of it. 25 kilograms, delivered like a magic trick in front of cheering guests. Dry ice is frozen carbon dioxide, and CO2 is heavier than air. Dump that much into warm water, and it does not decorate the pool. It replaces the air above it, laying down an invisible, unbreathable duvet exactly where a swimmer's mouth goes. The fog you can see is the harmless part. The gas you cannot see is the entire event. Guests jumped in to swim through the spectacle. At the surface, every breath was mostly carbon dioxide, and at those concentrations, CO2 does not politely ask you to leave. It switches you off within a few breaths, in place, without a sound that anyone can hear over a birthday playlist. 3 people did not come back up. One of them was Yekaterina's husband, Valentin, 32, who had just stepped out of the sauna and dove in to cool off. 7 more ended up in hospital beds with poisoning and chemical burns. I am not going to joke about any of them, and especially not about him. Her entire career was explaining what substances do to the human body, and the one substance nobody researched was the one they bought 80 pounds of for a pool party. The joke, and it is a bitter one, is about procurement. A professional fog machine, the theater kind that runs on glycerin fluid and produces the identical wall of mist with all the chemistry already domesticated, rents for about $50 a night. The pharmacist's birthday needed a theater supply catalog. It ordered an atmosphere instead, and the atmosphere was delivered in full. An e-bike battery is a brick of lithium cells, usually dozens of 18,650S, each about the size of a fat AA, and holding roughly the enthusiasm of a road flare that never agreed to a schedule. What keeps the brick polite is a little circuit board called a BMS, a battery management system. It watches every cell, balances the voltages, cuts the power when one of them starts having ideas. It is, in the most direct sense, adult supervision soldered on. Certified packs cost real money, though, and the internet overflows with tutorials for building your own from loose cells, nickel strip, and optimism. In Meadville, Pennsylvania, fire investigators traced an e-bike blaze to exactly that, a homemade battery pack, and issued the kind of warning that fire departments are tired of writing. Because here's what the tutorials whisper past. Lithium cells fail socially. When one overheats, it does not die alone. It cooks its neighbors, which cook their neighbors. A domino rally where every domino is on fire, spits toxic gas, and reserves the right to reignite after you have declared victory. The fire service calls it thermal runaway. Everyone else calls it where the garage used to be. And the failure does not need a dramatic trigger. A single counterfeit cell mixed into the batch. 1 cold solder joint, 2 cells at mismatched voltages shoved into parallel, and the pack starts quietly transferring power inside itself like an argument warming up in the next room. And it gets darker. In San Jose, a man heard an e-bike battery light off inside his own apartment and did the brave, decent, human thing. He ran toward it to fight the fire. Lithium smoke is not campfire smoke. It is a chemical cocktail, and within minutes he was down, and he did not get back up. The bravery deserves a moment of quiet respect. The battery deserved to be in a certified case with a real BMS, purchased complete for a few $100s, from people whose job is making sure 60 small road flares never hold a meeting. Range is a nice feature. So is waking up tomorrow. Mechanics have had a nickname for old multi-piece truck rims for generations: widowmakers. When the tire is inflated, those interlocking steel rings hold back compressed air storing energy in grenade territory. A big truck tire at highway pressure is not a rubber donut. It is a pressure vessel that happens to roll, which is why the rings must seat perfectly, why tire shops inflate them, locked inside steel cages while the technician stands well off to the side, like a man feeding a tiger, and why the federal rulebook on them reads like a bomb disposal manual. One of those rules is printed in letters you could read from orbit. Never, ever weld on a rim. Heat wrecks the steel's temper. Welds crack. And a cracked ring under 100 pounds of pressure is a spring-loaded guillotine with a patient trigger. One worker looked at a damaged split rim and arrived at the exact opposite conclusion. The sections seemed loose to him, so he welded them together, sincerely believing, the investigation later noted, that he was making the wheel safer. That is the cruelest trick confidence plays. From the inside, it feels identical to competence. Same warm glow, no warning light. On his last shift, he ran his bead over the rim sections, connected the air hose, and knelt down directly in front of the wheel to watch it take pressure, face first in the one spot that every safety poster in the industry marks with a skull. The welds held magnificently, right up until they did not. The rings let go, and the wheel returned all of its stored energy in a single installment, upward and outward, into the space where he knelt. The official report reads like a physics problem nobody wanted solved. A replacement rim was a phone call, a part number, and a fraction of one paycheck. The weld was free. It ended up being the most expensive thing in the entire shop. Somewhere on the shelf between water heater and electric chair lives the bare immersion rod, a naked heating element on a wire that you drop into a barrel, a tub, or, for the truly ambitious, a swimming pool, and plug straight into the wall. No thermostat, no grounding, no cutoff. Just mains electricity and open water, introduced to each other without a chaperone and left alone in the dark. It is the cheapest water heating technology on the market, sold for pocket change wherever winters are cold and budgets are tight, and forensic medicine journals keep a running series on it. 6 deaths in one 10-year review from a single region, with the mechanism always the same, boring and lethal. The metal sheath around the element corrodes. One pinhole later, the live conductor inside is shaking hands with the water, and the water is patiently waiting to shake hands with you. There is no drama when it happens. No sparks, no crackle, no cinematic warning. The barrel simply becomes part of the national grid, and the next hand that touches it completes the wiring diagram. Your muscles clamp shut, which is why victims are so often found still holding the container, and your heart gets its rhythm overwritten by whatever frequency your country runs on. In a pool, the current does not even need to finish the job itself. Paralyzing a swimmer in deep water is quite enough. American regulators have counted 33 electrocution deaths in pools and spas over 2 decades, and that is in a market drowning in certified equipment. Because the certified version exists everywhere. A sealed heater with a grounded shell, a thermostat, and a breaker that trips the instant a few milliamps go exploring. The naked rod saves about $20. Both versions heat the water exactly the same. The difference is only ever discovered by hand, and only once. Chesapeake, Virginia, April 2018. Anthony Dillard, 24, owned a 1994 Honda Civic, one of the most reliable, most affordable, most thoroughly crash-tested appliances the human race has ever mass-produced. He cut all of that off. Doors, roof, body panels, crumple zones, every gram of protection that engineers had spent 3 decades refining, straight into the scrap pile, replaced by a homemade exoskeleton of welded steel tubing. Car people call the style an exocar. Anthony called his something better. He called it the Death Cart. And credit where it is due, that is the most honest product naming in this entire video. Everyone else on this list lied to themselves first. Anthony skipped the denial phase and went straight to accurate labeling. The local car scene had watched the death cart make its rounds on Facebook for months, and the comments kept catching on one specific detail: the welds. People who joined metal for a living looked at the seams holding this rolling scaffold together and suggested, with increasing urgency, that a professional take a look. Anthony posted his response for the record. He was not a professional fabricator, and he did not want to hear any criticism about his welds. Read that twice. The safety inspection happened. He declined it, in writing, in public. The machine was registered with the DMV, but was not street legal, a bureaucratic way of saying the paperwork knew before he did. And in the final twist, days before the end, he listed the death cart for sale online, the universe holding one last exit door open with its foot. Then came an evening left turn. He lost control, slid across the center line into oncoming traffic, and was hit by a small roadster. Anthony, in a vehicle with no doors, no certified cage, nothing between his body and the event, was thrown out and did not survive it. The other driver, sitting inside a car that still had all of its engineering attached, did. A bone stock Civic, the exact car he started with, would have wrapped him in steel, belts, and airbags for the price of doing absolutely nothing at all. He traded a 5-star crash structure for tube steel and comment section confidence. In the end, the machine performed flawlessly to its own specification. It was the only spec it had. Kissimmee, Florida, 2025. An 81-year-old man was out in his backyard, shed with a project on the bench, and let us give the man his due. Nobody reaches 81 without surviving decades of projects, a lifetime of measured cuts and things that worked out fine. On the bench that day was an old propane tank, the ordinary grill-sized kind that lives behind half the houses in Florida. Empty propane tanks are the internet's favorite raw material. Cut one open and it becomes a fire pit, a smoker firebox, a rocket stove, a forge. There is just one clause in the contract, and it is the same clause every single time. A propane tank is never as empty as it claims. Liquid propane clings to the inner walls and lingers in the vapor space with the patience of a substance that has nowhere else to be and nothing but time. The gauge can read 0, while the tank still holds enough vapor to redecorate a building. That is why professionals purge tanks with water or inert gas before any tool touches the steel, a procedure so boring it works every time, which is the highest compliment safety engineering knows. He put a drill to the tank. A drill bit chewing steel is a small spark factory, hundreds of ignition sources a second, and on the other side of 3 millimeters of metal sat a cloud of propane vapor that had been waiting, possibly for years, for exactly one invitation. The vapor accepted. The shed went up in an explosion and fire, and deputies confirmed there was nothing anyone could have done by the time anyone could do anything. 8 decades of hard-earned wisdom, and the one lesson that mattered was hiding inside 20 pounds of steel that everyone in the family had walked past 1,000 times. A brand new fire pit retails for about $100. A purpose-built rocket stove, even less, shipping included. Propane has a perfect memory for what is inside it. The whole bet is whether the person holding the drill remembers too. Arizona, 2022. Ryan Woods got his pickup stuck in the mud, which is not a mistake. It is a rite of passage anywhere trucks and rain share a zip code. A friend rolled up to pull him out, and for that, you use a recovery strap. Modern kinetic straps are marvels. They stretch like a giant bungee, store the pulling truck's energy, then hand it over in one smooth surge. Store the energy. Underline that phrase, we are coming back to it. A strap has to attach to something, and the correct something is a rated recovery point. Forged, load-tested, bolted to the frame, designed for exactly this violence. The wrong something is the humble hitch ball, that chrome sphere on the back bumper, mounted on a single-threaded stud and rated for towing a trailer in a straight, gentle, boring line. Every off-road school on Earth opens with this exact warning, because generations of garage wisdom have passed the hitch ball method down like a family watch. So the strap went over the ball. First pulls, nothing. The stuck truck held its ground. The friend backed up to get a running start, which, with an elastic strap in the system, has a second name, drawing the slingshot. Somewhere in that surge, the hitch assembly reached its opinion and let go. Several pounds of chromed steel, launched by every joule the strap had banked, snapped back along the line of pull at the speed of a fired projectile and came through Ryan's windshield. The entire event fits inside a human blink. There was nothing he could have seen, dodged, or done. And I will not be making jokes about Ryan, because half of us have been the guy in the mud, waving thanks at a friend with a strap. The joke is reserved entirely for the hitch ball, and for every backyard sage who ever shrugged that this is how we have always done it. A rated recovery shackle costs less than a tank of gas. Stored energy has no loyalty. It does not care what it is attached to. It only cares about the moment it gets to leave. Weeki Wachee, Florida. A 3-story house with its own private elevator sounds like luxury real estate, and technically it was, if your definition is flexible. The owner's husband had built the elevator himself, 17 years after the house went up, out of wood, welded metal, and the organs of a forklift. No permits, naturally. Permits are for people who want their machinery looked at. Here is what a real elevator actually is. A machine wearing seatbelts over its seatbelts. Interlocks that refuse to move while a door is open. Safety brakes that bite the rails the instant anything slips. A device invented in 1852 precisely because platforms on cables kept doing what gravity suggested. Sensors that would rather shut the whole system down than pinch a sleeve. 170 years of engineering paranoia, every line of it written after a bad day exactly like the one coming. The forklift elevator had none of that. What it did have, county inspectors later documented, was dangerous electrical connections and a final status of illegal and unsafe, which is as close to profanity as a building department ever gets in an official file. One morning, a 66-year-old woman, a family friend, arrived at the house for a visit, and the machine was sent down to fetch her, the way it had been sent down for 17 quiet years. She was found beneath it. She had done nothing wrong. She trusted a house, which is exactly what a guest is supposed to be able to do, and she deserves to be left in peace, so the verdict lands entirely on the machine and its maker. A certified residential lift existed in every catalog of that era. Expensive, yes, but engineered by people who assume everything breaks eventually, because assuming that is the entire profession. The homemade version ran on the opposite assumption, that nothing would ever go wrong. That assumption costs nothing up front. It is always borrowed money. Hamburg, Germany, December 2009. 2 men built themselves a sauna, and I will admit, of everything in this video, a sauna sounds the most survivable. It is a warm, wooden room. What could a warm, wooden room possibly do to you? The answer, as always, lies in the heater. The factory answer is an electric sauna stove, sealed elements, a thermostat, nothing that burns, nothing to leak, a product so mature it is sold flat-packed next to towels. Their homemade answer was gas. A gas heater makes warmth by burning fuel. Burning fuel makes exhaust, and when combustion runs even slightly rich, that exhaust carries carbon monoxide, a gas with a resume built for exactly one job: colorless, odorless, tasteless. It binds to your blood 200 times more eagerly than oxygen does, and its opening symptoms are a mild headache and a pleasant drowsiness, which are, note carefully, the precise sensations a man in a hot sauna is expecting to feel. That is carbon monoxide's signature move. It does not interrupt your relaxation. It deepens it. The 2 men sat down for a session inside their own craftsmanship. The heater leaked its exhaust into a small, sealed, deliberately airtight wooden box, because a sauna is, by design, the most efficient carbon monoxide trap an amateur can build, and there was no detector on the wall, because detectors are for store-bought things. They never stood up. Investigators found no monitor on the wall to measure the gas, because the room had never met an inspector, and inspectors are the only people who ask that question before it matters. No fire, no bang, no alarm, nothing for the neighbors to hear. Just warmth, then more warmth than anyone needed, then none of it mattering. An electric sauna heater was sitting in catalogs across Germany the entire time, and a carbon monoxide detector costs about as much as a large pizza. The deadliest gas in this whole video is the only one that lets you feel wonderful the entire time it is working. Some products you buy for the feature. Some you buy for the thing they promise will never happen. 12 workarounds, 12 invoices from physics, paid in full. It never runs discounts, and it never loses a receipt. If your survival instinct just got a workout, subscribe, because the do-it-yourself community shows no signs of slowing down. And drop a comment. Which of these 12 would you have talked out of it? Be honest. Somebody in your garage is planning something at this very moment.